today what we're working on is a little less specific maybe than what we've talked about in the past, but it's something that's important because we need to make sure you're doing this all the time. Everything we've talked about in this class so far, and we'll talk about as far as trying to observe and mix color that we see and observe color correctly, all comes together with this assignment. So even though we're doing this right now, it's just something you should be continuing to do throughout your painting career, and especially the first year of painting when you're trying to learn color. You should be doing this every single day, so you get better and better and better and better at it. And this is color sketching. Now, I brought some examples here to show you guys. These are very quick. All of these range from about 15 minutes to maybe 20 or 25 minutes. Just very, very quick applications of color, thinking very impressionistically and trying to reduce everything down into larger shapes, almost as if we were doing a poster study. So you can consider this as this is sort of the poster study equivalent in painting, and that's the color study or the color sketch, where we are trying to build up a relationship of the overall colors using simple shapes and not getting too detailed and not getting too complex, and leaving it at more of a simple block-in stage so that we don't get colors muddy. You know, the same thing that happens with values, where, you know, we start with a really nice, strong 5-value system, and then as you try to break it down, it can get muddy or less clear. The same thing happens with color. You know, we typically have students who start with really nice, clean, strong color, and the more they go to work it, the more it gets wasted away and muddy and more obscure and less clean. The color sketch allows us to get an overall impression of the scene and capture the most essential colors that create the thing we're looking at, and then we just leave it, and it becomes a reference as we develop our painting to ensure that as the information is brought up, it still reduces to the overall color seen in the color sketch. So you need to be practicing this hopefully every day so that you get better and better at seeing, observing, and mixing clean color, and then just stating it simply and directly. And then when we have any more serious work, you're able to do this in a very short amount of time and then just set it aside so that we can reference it later. Keep in mind, some of the goals to being successful with something like this is to limit the amount of time you have to work on it, which means I want you to be doing these in maybe 20 to 40 minute shots today, and then after that, 20 or 25 minutes tops, and then that's it. The more of these you do, the better you will get at being able to see and mix and apply color. So it's not something you should just do a couple times a year, but something I hope you do every single day, and consider it a way to use up all of the paint from your previous day so that you don't have to throw it away, but you can instead apply it towards being a better painter, and then you don't have to use old paint in your good painting. So this is useful in that regard as well. Even if we look at the academics, I think it was Jerome who told the students to go outside and do a color sketch from life every single day, and they turned out, just little impressionistic paintings like this, but it gives you a much better sense of how to create nice, clean colors, and then those can be infused into your longer paintings. You don't need to necessarily use really great materials for this. I think this is linen mounted to illustration board here. This is just a loose scrap of linen here, and I think this is just watercolor paper, maybe, or it could be the Arches oil paper. I'm not really sure. So this is just really quick stuff. You're just throwing the paint down. Keep in mind, though, whatever you use, you want to make sure that your colors stay distinct and clear from one another, like how we try to build up a poster study. You don't want your colors to mush together. That will create mud. So select an appropriate surface for that, and it may require you to apply paint much more opaquely than you're typically used to. And so for something like this, I'd recommend that maybe the first couple minutes you can use a little thinner to establish just an overall base color, And then right after that, you go into straight opaque paint. You'll probably use quite a lot of paint when doing this, but the more paint you use, typically the cleaner your colors will become. So don't be afraid to use that paint, especially, get enough on your canvas so that you can really mix and see your color before you apply it. So I'm going to do these in just really quick shots. I've got three pictures up there. We're going to try and shoot through all of them really, really quickly. And I'm going to focus not on developing little details, but just getting an overall impression of the colors and flesh tones of each scene. I have three very distinct different flesh tones with distinct different lightings. We've got sort of a white light here, which is bringing out the model's local color of the flesh tone. There's a very sort of cool greenish light coming in on this one, which is shifting everything towards the grayish green section of the color spectrum. And then there's a little bit of a warmer light on this third one here on a Caucasian flesh tone. So each of them produces very distinct colors overall. And you have to turn off the part of your brain that's trying to isolate and tell you what color skin somebody has. And you have to just relax your eyes, let them go a little blurry, and then just paint things as the color blurs they are. And if you do, then you'll manage to get the overall colors correctly. So that's what we're going to try and do here. Just going to lay out a little paint here. And again, start with a little bit of thinner so that you can do a little bit of a kind of toning in here. And push some color around, and then from there we're going to go into more opaque paint. So I'm doing this top left one here. I'm letting my eyes go out of focus, just getting kind of a wash to represent the background. And then I'm going to go in a little thicker to start to block in some of the headdress and some of the flesh tone in here. And I'm just going to do just a little bit with the thinner and then switch right to more opaque paint. Notice I'm going to keep this small. Keeping it small will help me to avoid superfluous detail here. And I want to mix in relatively big puddles.
You're still using thinner?
Yeah, but now I'm pretty much done with the thinner. So I'm going to start going in with more opaque paint, I think, from here on out. Keep in mind if your drawing skills are lower or you're less confident in your drawing, you really should resolve that drawing before you start going in with color. You want your color to stay nice and clean. But ultimately, keep in mind that drawing is not really important in this. You have a free pass to not care how the drawing comes out because that is not the goal here. And if I find you taking too long on trying to figure out the drawing, we'll just switch up your subject to be less complex than, in this case, a figure, and you'll just do like a simple pot or a landscape or something like that so that the drawing is not really relevant. But I have noticed that when students go into trying to do a portrait or figure, they tend to focus so much on the drawing that they don't get any color laid down. So I'm done now with the thinner stage. I'm going right into the color stage, and I'm trying to do more of a Schmid style mixing where I'm just doing one or two colors in there and then laying the color down and laying it down pretty opaquely. And I'll just think about values in so much that I will try to make my lay down all of my dark values with the dark brush and my light values with a light brush, just so that I can make sure they're kept very distinct and clean.
Even though you're working small, you're working a pretty good sized brush.
Yeah. Want to really think in terms of big shapes here. This brush is a little stiff. Let's have another one. That's better. Okay. So that's almost pure burnt sienna that I'm just laying right on top. And now I'm getting to a stage of the painting where as long as I go thick enough in here, I'll be able to just mix paint directly onto the surface here. And not have to do even as much mixing on my canvas. And keep in mind also that that you need all of your paint to be opaque. You need to see how to achieve these effects with pure opaque paint without having to utilize transparency. If you utilize transparency in this, especially if you're working with with materials that you're not typically accustomed to working with, like if you're not intending to use this same canvas on the final painting, then trying to achieve these colors transparently on this is going to be misleading for you later on when you need to figure out how to recreate that color on a canvas with a different absorbency. So you want to make sure that you keep your colors opaque, because opaque colors will look for the most part the same on every canvas that you work on, especially when it's laid down this thickly here. And remember, I just want to kind of lean back, squint my eyes a little bit, or let them go out of focus, and check to see if I'm getting the overall color impression of what's up there. That's my main goal here. Again, not caring if my drawing is 100% right. That's kind of been the standard for the color class here is, you know, we're focusing more on color and less on getting the drawing right. Does anyone have any questions? I'm actually almost done with this first little one.
So, are you saving the sort of lighter orange parts of the cloth she's wearing on her head for the very last?
Yeah, that would be a less relevant to
Okay.
everything. So I'm going to build up the face here and then just add that in to get the correct relationship after I've keyed the face, or made a key with the face.
All right.
You're still using soft focus?
Yeah, you will for this whole thing. So kind of like how when we did no-tans, your eyes were just squinted the whole time. With this, your eyes should just be out of focus the whole time. And just really work hard to try and avoid any small details. Get some blue lips in here. Now, by doing this, what you're going to find is that you're probably putting in, or you'll end up putting in, more intense chroma that from a distance, or when you let your eyes go out of focus, will reduce down into the chroma of what it is you're looking at, which falls into that whole kind of loaded brushstroke idea and broken color idea that we've looked at in the past, which, as you've started to see, is very difficult to achieve correctly because it's not about matching exactly what's up there per se, but instead about getting an overall relationship that blends together to be what we're observing. So that's quite tricky, especially to preserve on a more finished scale if we were to take this out to a finished painting. But this will help you learn how to do that because it's going to just put you always in that sort of soft focus mode, much like doing the no-tans is always going to put you in the squinting mode and help you get your no-tan right away. Notice how I'm going back through and paying a little more attention to the background, how the background is painted, like just the right shade of sort of this bluish yellow helps the face make a little bit more sense. And if you don't pay attention to stuff like that, then your figure is going to look like it's kind of cut out and pasted on a background, and that tends to be the worst. You know, students will lay in initially they'll lay in a background, and then they'll paint the face. But since the background was a little easier to see and work out with all the shapes and colors than the face, that when they go to paint the face in, the face is kind of the wrong color to make sense with the background, and then things look flatter or don't make sense overall. So after in this case, after the face is laid in, we have to go back to the background and make sure we address the bits of color in here that are going to push the background into the correct lighting condition and color key so that it's going to make more sense and glow appropriately and not look like it's cut out and pasted. It'll help with that idea of integrating the figure into the background.
So what
You
are you
added
doing
more-
with that? Sorry.
You added more chroma? A bit?
Well, I actually lowered the chroma on the left side, and I just changed the color family a little bit on the right side.
Okay.
Katie, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, I wanted to know if you were just keying it up or if you were putting anything in the face to indicate the background. You're just working with the background now after you've done the face.
Yeah. Yeah, and now I'm going to lay in some of those notes for the headdress here. I could even lay in a little for the earring. Notice I'm holding my brush a lot by the back of the handle. I don't want to get too detailed. It really doesn't matter if all these are in quite the right spot. You're, again, just focusing on the color quality here. So this is very different than how I would build up an actual painting, just so you know. Usually I'm a little more reserved with the chroma and build chroma into it, which is just one way of working. Although sometimes I will work a little more directly like this and try to really state some strong color notes right away. It just depends on the painting and the feel that I'm going for. But you can certainly tell a difference in the final painting because one just has more color all over that's kind of just balanced to be correct, and then the other just has more of a kind of atmospheric quality all over and until I think overall.
You said before most students early on have problems with getting enough chroma in, so what, for this exercise would you have us just focus more on high chroma?
Well, yeah, I think that's what you should do for all color sketches.
All right.
Regardless of how you actually want to paint. With the color sketch, you should focus on trying to get more chroma rather than less, and make sure it's just balanced together appropriately so that it doesn't look like out of a tube paint. Okay, I think we're going to pretty much stop with that one. A little more note on that nose. Too much. I'm going to start this next one the same way. I just want the overall feel of the color. What color do you guys think I should mix for the overall? Like
Blue and red and white.
blue and red and white. Well, that'd be pretty purple. I'm not seeing this top right one. Is
Oh,
very
the
purple.
top one. Oh,
Yeah, I'm
looking
seeing it
at
more
Bill
green.
Nye.
So I'm actually going to go with ivory black and a little bit of lemon yellow, and then maybe I'll throw in some burnt sienna there to warm up some of those areas so I get sort of a warm, rich green. So by doing this, you're going to learn good ways to tone your canvas also. You know, really get a direct impression of what you're looking at, and then from there, sort of chisel down some of the colors as needed. And that's a way I'll sometimes work even Open Studios. It's kind of how I did it today. Just try to get an overall color and value impression, and then from there, refine it out. This is a tricky one because the temptation is always to get that skin tone just a little too pinkish or peachy, because people know that it's flesh tone. So, if you need to isolate so you can really see what those colors are, make sure you don't go too pink with it. You want to get the overall kind of grayish, muted tones that represent the colors.
Wow. I feel like I would have started out way lighter.
And that's why I laid in the dark first. Because if you isolate, it's really not as light as we might think it is.
No?
Especially if we compare it to the white border of the picture. And that's a good thing to address, because in reality, the flesh tones there aren't much darker than the flesh tones on for example, the painting underneath, or the photo underneath of Bill Nye here. The values are almost the same, and it just goes to show you that most people or most students blow out the values of their flesh tones to be too high, and as such lose the opportunity to get them in the correct chroma. Now, the flesh tone may look a little bit darker on the picture on the top right here that I'm painting than the one below, but that's has to do with the chroma issue that we spoke about several sessions ago, the brightness versus lightness thing. I'm going in now with more pure paint here. Note how far away I am from my canvas. I'm not up here painting like this. I'm back here, so I can rock back and take a look and then lean in as needed.
So you're done with thinner?
Yeah, I want a pure paint now. Even catching some blue at the edges of the flesh in the background. Now keep in mind, I'm really just flicking my eyes back and forth. I'm not letting my eyes focus for too long at the image. I really want my eyes to just respond to the overall color impression that's there. That's going to give you stronger colors. The more you look at your subject, the more your eyes are going to adjust and kind of refocus, and you're going to see colors differently, and you're going to see them outside the relationship of the whole. So make sure that we're just sort of flicking our eyes, going very, very fast, back and forth. You're just glimpsing up there, and then you're trying to lay it down on your canvas. Again, not get too specific. anywhere. That's what's going to be the hard thing. I can tell you're looking too long at your subject if you try to get too specific in your painting. Remember, we want these to be really rapid fire. Then we just stop when we have the overall color impression. Little minutia can be off, and that's fine, as long as we've captured the overall idea of it. And this is something that's hard because you're going to have to exercise a little bit of objectivity here, where you can step back and say, oh, is this close enough? Yeah, I think I've got the overall right, and not just noodle it forever and ever and ever. The more it's noodled, the more you're going to sacrifice the overall atmosphere and color quality in favor of getting little tiny pieces correct. And remember, just the little tiny pieces are not as important as the overall whole. So it's not as simple a matter as we've been working with before, where it's just keep going until you've painted as much as you can paint. This is you have to give yourself a stopping point, and we want to mandate that by time. Also, give yourself a set amount of time. Set the timer if you need to. Today, I want to give you guys between 20 and 40 minutes for each one. After that, moving forward, you really shouldn't spend more than 40 minutes. Anything past that, you're going to start to lose focus on the big, important colored shapes that are making this the design and the painting that it is. That's good enough there. Any questions on that one? Probably go a little lighter interface in the front, but it's again, the overall impression is there. And if you guys have trouble mixing back into an area, then I would encourage you not to do too much of that, or at least making sure you have enough paint on there where you can go in there and just massage it in, and it's not going to make that big of a difference. But if you paint thinly, then every little thing you put on there is going to have a huge impact on altering the color, and it might be unrecoverable if it's too big of a change. So you can always be a little safer just by throwing more paint on there.
Are you paying attention to the edges at all?
No.
No?
Well,
Just
only
that?
in so much that you're just trying to not soften it.
Okay.
Paint everything as directly as you can and don't soften it. If you get the color correct, the color jumps from one piece to the next, then edges are going to soften out on their own. Areas that should appear rounded or flat will look rounded or flat. All right, let's knock this third one out here. Again, I'm going to start with a little thinner. Just get kind of the overall background idea in place. Kind of a purplish, bluish. There's a little bit of variation in there, but it's hard to peg down. That tends to be some of the hardest color to mix. Like, oh, it looks kind of purple. No, it looks kind of red. Well, with that, you kind of just load up the mineral spirits, diffuse the big mixture by putting in little splices of all these little colors and just not mixing them all the way as you lay it down. And it will kind of settle on some magical in-between color.
Kind of like the broken color thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the idea of broken color, but I got a lot of variation in there without actually painting each individual transition. I'm going to lay a little more white out here. Can you grab my white paint? Start to lay his hair in. Now you really have to employ this some degree of knowledge mixing here. Like if I'm, for example, I'm painting this hair in, and I thought to myself, oh well, the strokes that I made became a little too bluish, probably because they mixed a little with the underpainting that I just threw down there. So what was my solution to do? Well, I needed to add some yellow, but adding yellow ochre didn't make it rich enough. It still looked a little kind of chalky or dull. So I went to my cadmium yellow medium to lay in there, and then that pushed enough chroma in there to overcome the chalkiness of the initial wash. So we need to get really good at facilitating these fast snap decisions to affect color change, so that when we're with a model and this really matters, we're not wasting time. A little too yellow.
You're using the CAD red medium?
Yes. I've got some CAD yellow medium, CAD yellow lemon, and yellow ochre. Just kind of pushing all these colors around here to get my color base.
And then crimson?
Yeah, that was a little crimson in there. And remember, flesh tone is actually lower chroma than we tend to think it is. On the Munsell scale, it's something in like the 6 to 9 range, with 15 or 16 being the higher range of chroma. So it's not super chromatic, but there are little shifts in blueness or yellowness or redness, and so we want to try and capture that quality. The thing that's tough is when you push that chroma too far when you're trying to facilitate a change, like adding alizarin, for example, and then you might make things so pink that it no longer looks human. So it's kind of that fine balance. Like you need to make something more pink or more orange, but you don't want to make them look like an Oompa Loompa or like they're completely I don't know, sunburned.
But it is pretty pink.
Yeah, and part of that's the photo, and that's fine. And if you keep in mind that it will look fine as long as you get all the surrounding colors in context correctly, then that kind of frees you up. You can paint flesh whatever color you want. That's an important concept to keep in mind, because it allows you to free yourself from the trappings of your brain of wanting to make everything a particular flesh color. If you get too formulaic in mixing flesh tones, then it's going to prevent you from doing paintings of people and things in different lighting situations. So, if you up the chroma of a face, that's fine. You just have to make sure the chroma of the surrounding area is is increased enough to have it all make sense. And that's the big important thing. But it's dangerous to make blanket rules like, you can't let the chroma of your face get higher than this, or you can't ever paint people with pinkish flesh tones or greenish flesh tones or orangish flesh tones. You need to be open to what nature actually is showing you. Nature, as they say, is the greatest teacher. So if you paint something and it just looks too, pink or too orange or whatnot, there's two possibilities. Either you indeed observed it incorrectly and painted it too pink or too orange or too whatever, or you haven't added enough surrounding information in for it to make contextual sense. So these color sketches should help you figure that out. I mean, you should be able to make things more chromatic than they actually are, as long as you get those surrounding colors in there well enough to read or to sort of neutralize your subject. Just remember that if you hit, 40 minutes today, or in the future you hit 20 minutes and it's just not coming out right, just start over. Because hopefully you've gained enough knowledge in that 20 minutes or whatnot that if you were to do it again, you'd make better decisions, so you'd get there faster. Don't noodle the same color sketch until you've completely lost all color, because then you're just going to waste paint, you're going to waste your time. Really great greenish brown shadow under his chin. Need to get that.
I think the color that was hitting him had a red, and that's why it's making the green and the green the blue behind.
Possibly, yeah.
The
Well, it's
light
probably a
was
warm light.
Yeah, warm
Yeah.
light. Yeah.
And also, we're experiencing most likely some discoloration from the printing job.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, greenish shadows are not uncommon. I think
Mm-hmm.
the painting today we did from the model had pretty greenish shadows. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not something we should not anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
Add some eyebrows in here. He needs some eyebrows, and we'll be pretty close to done with this guy. Keep in mind too that sometimes smaller notes, like what I'm adding in here, these sort of greenish golden with hints of red eyebrows, they might alter the surrounding colors enough to put it into the right context. So it really does work better when you build these up as a whole, considering everything, instead of just noodling over one element and stressing that it doesn't look quite right. It could be that you just need to fill in some surrounding area, and then it will start to look right. And that's really difficult, I know, for a lot of students to figure out. Luckily for me, when I first started painting, that's kind of how I was introduced to painting, so I just went with it and accepted it, and luckily it went fine. But it typically requires that you go super, super slow in an area to make sure you're absolutely confident in it before moving on, whereas now we're just going to just throw these colors on. So keep in mind that you need to really coat this all over to make sure that all the relationships are really working together.
What was the eyebrow color? Was it yellow ochre and viridian?
I think I used Viridian, maybe some yellow ochre, some cad yellow medium, some burnt umber, and some cad red.
Okay. Everything.
A little bit. Don't let your colors get neglected in these color sketches. Use them all. Eyes are not really important here. The rest is in the face isn't really contributing too much, I think, to the overall color, so I'm not going to put too much of it in. I might do a little shadow for the nose here. But really consider you only need to put in a detail if you think it might be affecting our perception of the color in an area significantly. Other than that, you can, for the most part, omit and simplify. That's a better choice. Omit and simplify to get the overall impression of what we're looking at. Probably do a little bit of the teeth. Although without the little shadow of the lips in context, it probably won't make too much sense. I'd rather work the structure here, a little bit of the side there. That's good. I think the mouth is going to be too small of a shape for me to hit on here, so that's okay. And I think the keystone needs a little more color correction for it to read overall correct. So I'll just add some color in here. That's too much white. There we go. That's a little better. Remember, I want my eyes out of focus, swinging back and forth between my subject and the reference, trying to see any color notes that might just stand out as a little too far off. And then I go and readdress those color notes. And allow yourself to paint weird colors in flesh tone. You know, if you want to be a good portrait painter, you have to be okay with letting that happen. If you see a green in there, put a green in there. If you see a yellow in there, put a yellow in there. Put whatever in there that you see when your eyes are relaxed and you're flicking back and forth. And that'll help you make stronger, more believable portraits that don't look as generic and don't look as though they're neglecting a good light source. This guy. Sure, it's pretty white. That's the white of the paper there. I'll just toss in a little bit of that bow tie color. Just because his bow tie is so cool. I'm gonna have to go really thick to cover what's there, but that's all right. Again, remember with this, you may find that you have so much paint on your ground that what you lay down isn't affecting enough of a color change. So it just means you should dump more chroma into the color you're mixing on the palette and keep dumping more and more intense chroma until when you lay down a stroke, it mixes well enough to achieve a color change. And you'll get there. You just have to not be afraid to use color. Just a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more until you get there. Okay, I think that's pretty good. A little more chroma back here. Keep in mind, I laid out fairly sizable blobs of paint, which would normally last me probably a couple days worth of painting, and I used them all up in these three, well, probably a little over half to 2/3 of the paint up in these three little paintings. So that's about the volume of paint you should be shooting to go through. Not afraid to mix it, not afraid to use up that paint. More paint will achieve much cleaner colors than too little paint. And we'll do several of these today. Our goal is going to be to shoot through 3 of them, so that by the end of the day you'll have kind of what I have here. And we'll see if each one represents a different and unique color scheme and lighting condition.